5, 4, 3, 2. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Kevin Smelt. I am the host of our new podcast, Apes of the Atomic Age, title that has already caused some controversy within, but we'll discuss that in a moment. I first want to introduce my good friend and co-hawk here, Benjamin Vanderhorst.
Hello, yes, that's me.
Tell us a little bit something about yourself.
About myself. Well, I'm here to talk with my fellow ape.
Nice.
His name is Kevin.
Yes.
And my name is Ben.
Awesome.
We're both apes.
We are.
Despite what others might think, we are both apes.
And controversy, first thing.
Yes, right out the gate, controversy. And here we are in a sea of technology, very expensive microphones around us.
Yeah, which we're not using, folks.
And none of us can get it to work.
Nope.
So we're on a phone. This is a phone. We're recording on a phone. But whatever works.
Whatever works.
Finally,
exactly.
Something.
We'll get all the fancy stuff to work eventually, folks, and then you can maybe have a little better quality. But for now, I think this works fine. We played it back to ourselves, and it's revolutionary.
It's working just fine.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
You think in hindsight, if we discovered this first, we would have even gotten mics? Because
the mics are fun, though.
They are fun, and being able to listen to yourself. Yeah. But anyways, back on the story of the... we've tried this multiple times. Things went wrong. I'm not really going to go into that, but what I will go into is kind of what I have found advantageous is every time it doesn't work, it gives me the opportunity to kind of rethink the approach, right? Though the story is pretty funny about us arguing over the title, I'm just going to start with explaining why I picked this title, because it ties into what the show's about. Yeah. And what the show's about, really simply, is just anything. Talking to people, getting people's perspectives. If I meet someone who's interesting, bring them on the show. But we also want to do a lot of individual little episodes, even mini-series. If I can introduce one that we talked about today.
With main topics.
With main topics, exactly.
And this first episode is just going to be an introductory to this whole thing and explaining it. So.
Yeah. With an anchoring topic, but the nice thing about these discussions is that they're a little bit more free, unlike some of the other episodes we'll do later. So, for example, I plan on doing, with the new Jungle Book stuff out, I want to do Jungle Book After Night.
Yeah, After Night. Jungle Book After Night.
What inspired this is, other than like my personal obsession with Kipling's writings, is one thing I both find interesting and really frustrating is when these old writers come back into the limelight. These people who've been dead forever. They're suddenly put under heavy scrutiny because of their beliefs at the time. Now, do I think we should sugarcoat and dismiss these things? Absolutely not. My problem is using it as a tool to basically scare people away from demonizing works, as you put it earlier when we were talking about, like don't bother to read them because it's all whitewashed, it's all blah blah blah. And I think a lot of that's really misconceived. The advantage I have over a lot of people who argue about this is I've actually read the books.
I've read most of it. The Jungle Book, I've read most of it. Yeah.
Right? Yeah. But it's.
But that's a good point. You've actually read the material.
I've actually read the material.
You actually read it all the way through. And I was saying, I read a story from it just yesterday. The story from the Jungle Book called "The Miracle of Perun Bagat." And
awesome story.
In the very beginning of the story, it talks about how this the way a Indian man at the time could get on in life is the way he put it.
Right.
And of course, what it meant was schmoozing up to a lot of the British.
Yep.
And I was reading that, and it's the very first page of it, and I thought out the gate, I was thinking, wow, somebody could have some criticism right away.
Right away. Yep.
But then I thought, of course, well, how about we finish the story? How about we finish it?
Crazy thought.
Thought. And so I did, and it was a great story, and I don't want to get into it, but sure enough, by the end of it, that beginning detail of schmoozing up to the British in order to get on in life, as it was put, was far in the background and not a main part of the story, but just a detail of the time, and because it shaped the character from its beginning and showed a background.
The massive transition, right, from going to basically paid for by the British government leader, puppet leader, essentially is what he was. Yeah. And I think that's actually very interesting for a story written in the late 1800s, turn of the century. So, and I'm glad you brought up the schmoozing up to the British thing.
Yeah.
that can get criticism right away. But let me just ease everyone's mind. No, well, actually, this won't ease your minds. It's just a little bit of some facts. That is how it was.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that is just the way it was. I think why I like to celebrate these works, because what's interesting versus like if I was writing a story that took place in the 1800s, or you were, or a contemporary author was. Right. What's interesting about Rudyard Kipling is he was writing at the time that was going on. You get a really like full frontal perspective, not just like what the world was like then, but a perspective.
Yeah, his perspective.
Someone else's perspective, exactly. And sorry, I'm getting a phone call. I'll pause in a moment and get to that after the introduction. But yeah, it gives you that perspective of what it was like back then. And I think that's what people need to realize, like, that it's not the same world as it was now. It's the ancient world. Yeah. And it showed a lot of Kipling's stories, because he's so intimate with the current events, he kind of clues to things that are going to change if you read some of his short stories, particularly his journalist stuff, right? So that's what compelled me to do it. And I know this is off topic for what we're doing today, but
this is totally.
But it's a good introduction for what my goal is. My goal is not to. I want to put everything under a microscope, but fairly. Because what I've been seeing lately so much is just cherry picking, and cherry picking. You want to validate an argument, but you don't want to take in the full story. And I think that's really scary. So the subject for today is communication. So let me start with why I got the title, Apes of the Atomic Age, because it's just, since we're talking about humans, it's a show about humans. There's essentially every talk show. People getting to know people, right? People who are listening, who want to know other people's perspectives. And I think it's a really rewarding thing, especially with podcasts, is that's just opened it up immensely, where you can really you can take the time to listen to someone for hours, hear their full story. It's not like some, interview on CNN where they just use the convenient sound bits they want to tell the story, right? Because even in a news network, you're more a storyteller than you really are a fact provider, right?
A storyteller with a time limit.
With a time limit, exactly.
With a time limit.
And with an agenda. Yeah. There's always something they're trying to. So it's really hard to trust all that. So to actually just be able to listen to someone, whether you like them or not, or their views, I think it's important to listen to everything they have to say. Because how else in hell are you going to find a middle ground unless you practice discourse properly?
To find the nuance.
Yeah, exactly. And this is nothing new, because that's kind of the angle I wanted to go at. Anyways, the title, so Apes of the Atomic Age. Earlier you said I'm an ape, you're an ape. Yeah, we're clearly not, we're taking more of a Darwinian route with our personal beliefs, but we're open to talk about anything of anyone. But as far as we stand, yes, I believe that we evolved from the greater apes.
Right.
Yes, some scientists like to kind of categorize us as hominids above greater apes. Whatever, man, we're apes. Yeah. And I use atomic age because that is the age we're living in. A lot of historians like to kind of define generations of humanity on a certain age. That's why you have the Stone Age, right? Because stone technology was first being used, which led to the Bronze Age, which was really started to newer evidence keeps finding that civilizations go back further and further, which is awesome. Something to be celebrated, not fought. Right. We'll talk about that later. But the Bronze Age is when we really start seeing these civilizations go crazy, really expand. You see a lot of things you can recognize now today, society-wise. It's politics, it's rules, it's trading. System of trading is a big part. Trade, I think, is really what started civilization. I know everyone says prostitution is the oldest profession, but I think it's trade first.
Well, that's also
then prostitution.
One might say that prostitution is a trade.
It is a trade.
You are trading something for something else.
That's what I'm saying. I think that came afterwards, and people realize, like, hey, I can use this idea of currency for their base or more desires. But let's put them equal. How about that? I like to assume that chicken or the egg, which one came first. I think either way, the order doesn't matter. They came.
And the thing about the Bronze Age for trading was it wasn't just trading within your own community. They were expanding communities to another community.
Exactly. And the spread of information.
Increasing the web of apes.
Yep. Yes. So, fast forward all these stages. Now it's the atomic age. Oppenheimer, when he tested the atomic bomb in New Mexico in the 40s, he knew, shit. Yeah. I've changed everything, and it did. It changed everything. It changed our complete our outlook on things like trade, on foreign policy, And also it just brought new fears, because that's what I like to think about sometimes, is like, there's always something that humanity is going to be deathly afraid of, right? Whether it's in the Old Testament days, you're just afraid of God coming into town and fucking everything up, to now we have a more logical fear. We literally have the technology to wipe each other out completely.
Yeah.
So,
and it harkens back to the Bronze Age, because of course there was a collapse in the Bronze Age,
Yeah.
They had an influx of new ideas and new things, new factors that humanity didn't really have experience with.
Right.
And ultimately, and we don't really know as a factor to what was the main cause of it, but there was a lot of ideas of what well, we know that it collapsed,
right?
And there was an age of it was a dark age, you might say, after that, or was it about I don't know.
Well, it's like not like the dark ages, but it was definitely a dark age.
There was a loss of literature for sure.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, and then literature picked up after that, and we started getting records again.
Yep.
But yeah.
And what's changed in between the lines in that time? This was fascinating too. I know historians always. What I also find interesting is always look into these old historical scrolls. It's like, well, someone said it once, it must be accurate. It's like, you never thought that just like today people might have, I don't know, lied. You know the old saying, victors often write the history, right? So it's like, I think like a lot of the stuff we take from like Roman literature, it's like, you got to be careful, because I'm sure it is mired with a tsunami of shit biases that
from their perspective,
right? And they were also a colonial force. They thought they were in the right, but
right.
So now we're so that was a really way to harken it back to the same age, which is freaky now, right? Because we have been, and to be fair, it didn't really start with a nuke, because the arms race of technology started, like, if you want to give it a time frame that everyone knows about, I would argue the American Civil War. That's when shit really started. Yes, when the industrial age was starting to pick up and also be attributed to war. I mean, this is, you went from like gas lantern lit streets, and horse-drawn transportation within a few decades.
Yeah.
You got electricity. Yep. You got fucking submarines that were built first during the Civil War. Automobiles came in, which their origins go back.
It was a boom.
Further, it was a boom, and it was a very big rush. And you happen to have these people at the time, leaders who were kind of really men and women perfectly fit to their times, that really pushed it. But one might say with no discipline.
Yeah.
Right. And that's kind of, so going back to Apes of the Atomic Age, I kind of feel like that's what we are now. We're defined by
apes of the Atomic Age,
by this fear, this cloud of doubt, what the nuclear age could bring, also the opportunities it has brought, right? And it really has changed the way we view things and the way we discuss things. I mean, like, political discourses radically changed ever since that first bomb went off in Japan. I wish I could have been a fly on that wall in that meeting when the Soviets and the Americans got together and the big news came out. Like, that must have been tense, because essentially what happened at that round table is the start for the continuation of all the conflicts that we go through now. You can link it all back to the Afghanistan conflicts, with the Russians, and then with us, later with Bin Laden. Like, it's all connected. It's crazy. And these men, these prideful apes, just gathering around this table, not knowing what the fuck to do with the future. I think that's where I can kind of empathize with these people, is, what do you do, though? I criticize them for a lot of the profound, childish mistakes they made, but what do you do? You're a world leader, and you're brought to that table, and you just got handed on a silver platter. By the way, the world is completely fucking different forevermore. We like to talk about the end of World War II being this great peace, but it wasn't. It was a great division.
Yeah. Oh, peace maybe for a little while, but it
in certain corners.
There's always pockets of peace. Yeah.
Overall, it never really stopped.
Yeah, I know. Into the Cold War, and that tension there, and it never really went away.
Exactly.
And that's. There's still fragments of it now, and maybe we are in a shadow of comfort here in America, where a lot of people have forgotten about it, or chosen to believe it's over. But it's but it still exists. We still have the nukes. We still have it's kind of looming. This power that people have over each other, and I don't know.
To give you some perspective, listeners, we are in Bremerton right now, Manette area. Beautiful area. The irony is, as we're talking about this, about a 10-minute drive in the direction I'm pointing, which you can't see, there's the Trident nuclear base. So, what a perfect place to have this discussion, because we are
under the shadow
of 30 nuclear warheads, armed and ready to go right over there. I sleep under that comfort every night, guys, knowing that.
Delicious. Wonderful blanket.
Yeah, wonderful blanket of safety, and looming death all at once, and that's what I find interesting about it. And the title will always be relevant in this show, folks, because I will always bring it back. Like Ben has already looped into it perfectly, where it's relatable, because I want to talk to people about their lives, their experiences, but also kind of like, hey, what are your views on this? You know, I love history because I think it's a responsibility of the masses. It's not something that you should do as a hobby. I'm sorry, that might be my most pushy thing, but I think it's a responsibility of the masses, because most of our mistakes that we make historically are because we refuse to look back and learn from it. You know, and like you just said earlier, it could be wanting not to look back at that, but you just don't want to reflect on that. You want to admit that it's over. You know, like, that's the great piece where we've gotten a lot better. But have we? I don't see really a linear pattern in whether we have steadily gotten better. I kind of see a up and down. And I'm seeing that right now in my lifetime. And that's what I want to talk to people about. That's why I want to bring our apes of the atomic age in here and discuss that. Also, anything else? Any nerdy topics? Sure thing. You know, I'm hoping if we get some listeners, we'll start getting like recommendations and stuff. Like, could you guys talk about Alexander of Macedonia, or whatever? Please don't, folks. I'll do it, but prefer not to. But I say that now. But you know, once I start researching anything, it gets fascinating. So, no, I'm excited for this.
Yeah, it's exciting. Yeah.
We are going to start talking about communication. I missed a phone call, though, so you're going to have a little bit of a pause, and then you'll get right back to it.
All right.
So stay tuned. Yes, please pause it.
Right,
sorry, I need to call back.
No worries.
That was good.
Yeah.
And that's a good sample, too, the real thing. And we are back. Whoa.
Hey.
We both had the same idea. So, communication.
Communication. Good
way to kind of pry this open, Ben. Are you worried about our communication as a species, our discourse?
I thought you meant nature as a relationship between the two of us.
Oh, I mean, that too.
Yeah. Do we talk enough?
Yeah.
Do we need to talk about it?
Do we understand each other?
Okay, but as a species, well, you know, in one respect, communication has a great potential and has increased in many ways, right? I mean, just think of the internet.
Yeah.
You know, just something blatantly obvious, right? We have so many ways of communicating now. But is the communication as good as it used to be, or as
or was it ever?
I mean, does anybody talk like Lincoln anymore? You know, does anybody talk like that anymore? Can you think of somebody who's eloquent?
Eloquent.
Eloquent.
You mean his manner of speaking.
Right. His as you know, he doesn't have to hem and haw about what he's saying. And, you know.
When it comes to Abraham Lincoln, I don't think anyone talks like Abraham Lincoln. He was a little bit of a unique guy,
perhaps,
and thank goodness for him. But no, that's a good point. No, I have noticed that yes, language. Because you're right, this technology is a wonderful tool.
Yeah, but
it has nothing but potential.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, I just don't see it used that way. And so to go back to people like Abraham Lincoln or whoever, your great historical speakers who, you know, because they couldn't depend on a teleprompter, because they couldn't depend on just tweeting like our current commander-in-chief does. You know, everything had to be thought out, prepped ahead of time. You know, I mean, people would slave over their speeches, and they made sure that they covered everything. I mean, back then,
prep work. Okay.
Yeah, you have people saying like, "Oh man, I sat through the State of the Union. That was a long hour."
Yeah.
Abraham Lincoln was known to give 4-hour speeches at a time.
Yeah.
But people stuck around for that shit.
They did. They didn't zone out. They didn't go on Twitter. They didn't, know, they didn't have these distractions that we have today.
Because they didn't have the distractions.
And that's the thing about the communication nowadays. It can serve as a distraction. It can also be a crutch. You know, people get lazy, and people don't discuss things, you know, face to face like we are on this podcast, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's I fall into it. I know. Here I am. I've lost my train of thought. I don't know what I'm doing. Where's my phone? I don't know. It's right in front of me.
Yeah, it needs a wiki something really quick. What do I say next?
What do I say?
No, but I mean, that's. I'm glad you went into that because that was my next thing. With the technology being misused for communication too, like you said, make it lazier to make a distraction. Also, when you said face-to-face, the benefit of having a discussion with another human being in person, there's always room for misinterpretation, but there's a lot less room for it.
Right.
You know, like an example, years ago, I texted an ex saying, "All right, I'll see you soon!" Exclamation point. I thought that was plenty to convey that I wasn't grumpy. I was just saying, "I'll see you soon." I shouldn't even have to put punctuation in there if I really don't want to. It should be fine, right? But it's always, you get the text back. Are you okay? Or you hear some shit about it later, like, why were you moody? I wasn't. Well, based on your text. It's like,
based on my text.
Well, let's just stop it right there. You should never base someone's mood off of text. That is just ridiculous. And that's the disadvantage, is people can, talking person to person is in the moment.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas a text or a tweet, people can stew over that. They can look at it and then they can just kind of fit in their little interpretation. They can analyze it. Yeah, they can put it under a microscope and they can fit in their own little interpretations, and that's the truth they go with. Right. That's what I'm scared of right now. And I'll start with what I call truth manufacturing. It's something that's going on a lot. So obviously we're talking about the smaller, like just human to human, but. And that's already kind of like discouraging enough, but to know that this is how it's become too in the political theater, especially over the past few years, where, Donald Trump tweets, but he's not the only one. And he wasn't the only one to do that in politics before either. And, that's another thing, is the format of Twitter. I just think it's not appropriate for good communication and informing people because it has to be so short, right? And that's just kind of what I feel like communication has become these days. There's no patience for it. So even if I brought a bunch of people from our time, our generation, put them in a time machine and then put them in front of Abraham Lincoln when he's giving one of his speeches, no matter how riveting it is, these people are, even without distraction, they'll probably wander off because the discipline of attention span isn't there anymore. It's just completely gone. So I know, for those of you who know me, I'm a windbag. I talk a lot.
Thank goodness for this anyway. Yeah. Because
But at the same time, and maybe this is just me getting defensive, but like, you know what, maybe I talk too much, or maybe y'all don't talk enough. Have you ever thought of that? How many of you ever, I'll give you an example that kind of made me moody at the time. Mind you, I was pretty stoned, and this is one of the other attempts of the podcast where something went wrong, but I was trying to explain something. I think I was trying to explain like my philosophy behind this show, and I was getting all insecure because of you and Riley. Riley's another member who'll be on the show at some point. Your guys' facial reactions. You were not letting me finish. You were just giving me these looks like, why don't you just let me... And that's the thought afterwards. Like, why... Actually, I was fine where I was going. I knew where I was going. Okay. I started doubting myself because people just didn't have the patience to let me finish. I know you want to throw an opinion, and that's fine, but damn, can you hold that until the speaker is done speaking? That's a huge part in communication I see nowadays, is that there's no... And what really, literally broke my heart for humanity was the last presidential debates between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. Because it was like watching children.
Oh, yeah.
They would not let each other finish.
I mean, I've been disappointed with... Go ahead. Sorry.
No. Go ahead.
Okay. I mean, I've been disappointed with the discourse in the debates since Obama was running.
Right.
Probably
even before.
I was pretty young.
Too young, but
didn't really interested.
I'm doing it now too. Sorry.
No, for sure. I got you. But I've been disenfranchised with the debates ever since Obama was running. I liked Obama a lot. I think he had a great message, and when he was running, and all that. But the debates ever since then, I just another political point, another red herring, another vague stance on something, another nothing specific, no real solutions,
Right.
And I just I wasn't sure how valuable it was anymore, those debates. And I mean, I still watch them all. You know, I watched all of them when Donald was running. I watched the Republican debates, even though a lot of other people I knew didn't. And I still didn't like just about any of them. So, you know.
But you took the time to listen to
I did.
them.
I tried. I did my best. But
yeah.
It's, I don't know. Where were we going with this?
No, I mean you went with it just fine. I was just you're going into the debates as being disappointed and just kind of disenfranchised with the debates because of the bad communication. What started me was the debate specifically between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. Absolutely. Like and that's why I'm sorry for being a hypocrite earlier and butting in, but like when I go back now, since I've been kind of like obsessed with like U.S. history documentaries, and I look at, you're right, you're too young to really understand, right? We assume like, oh, they probably know what they're talking about. They're leaders, but when you get older and you realize how much of everything is a crock of shit, if you listen to those same debates between Al Gore and Bush, you know, and Clinton and George Bush Sr., it's the same shit. You would feel the same frustration you're feeling now because we have been plagued by these career politicians who in many ways I think have actually helped, and they're not fully to blame, but I think they are partly to blame for bad discourse and communication because that's what they've made it.
Yeah.
You know, and there's seriously like moments where party bosses have talked like, you know, be vague. They are trained this way. Like you might notice like how frustrated. Like I remember the first Vice interview with Barack Obama. I was excited. It's like, all right, maybe they're going to get some real shit out of this guy.
Well, they've changed a lot. Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Same thing. Obama would just, like you said, red herring, just go around. Like, you can tell, like, man, he's just trained. You know, like just like the moment there's a question, just like the Manchurian candidates, like I have a reaction ready. I know how to deviate this. I bet they're so skilled at it they don't even have to think about the question. They just like keywords, marijuana, crime. Good, I got an answer. Woo!
It's almost impressive. It's impressive.
It's impressive, but it's damaging as hell.
It is.
And that's what people see. You'd be amazed with how much internationally we like to celebrate like, oh, we're all such individuals, but we're really not. And that's not even a bad thing. I think this is a refreshing, unifying thing. If I've learned anything really refreshing about people from like going to different places in the world, it is really how mundane and the same we all are.
Right.
You know, and I think that's also a good lesson when people like, for example, let's say the Japanese government does something fucked up. You know, a lot of people say, the Japanese. No, it's not the Japanese. It's their government. Like any other country, we don't have a say what they do. We can pretend like that's the case, but it's not, right? So, and that's just what I've learned is that people on the ground, your average everyday citizens, are like everyone else. It doesn't matter if they have an atheist background, if they're Islamic, if they grew up in Morocco or in Iceland. People are generally the same. They want the same things. They don't want to live in poverty. They don't want to suffer. They want good futures for their children. You know, like I do, like that's an optimistic thing that I do think a lot of people are generally good-natured. Whether people are good or bad, I think that's not something anyone should jump into, including myself, because it's a tar pit of perspective. What is good and what is bad, right?
Yeah.
But in terms of good nature, I saw it everywhere. You know, we're not that unique to each other. And as much as we try to celebrate that, we have to realize that we are so dependent psychologically as a species on leadership. A lot of people don't want to think for themselves. They are either followers or leaders. And that's on a small capacity too. You don't have to be a leader of a country or even a boss in a company, but just amongst like friends, you always see in a group of friends, there's always someone who's a bit more boisterous, who's a bit more loud and vocal, and will lead the party around, right? That's just the leader personality, and then the rest are followers. And I'm not trying to dog on followers.
No, definitely not.
Because both followers and leaders have made profound mistakes, and also they've worked together well to do amazing things for humanity. So it all falls down on perspective. But I'm seeing that those opportunities disappear more and more and more. It's a quote, an old 70s song, what was it? Human respect is disintegrating at a level I'm amazed with right now. It's weird to think and don't worry, folks, we'll provide sources so you guys don't think I'm crazy. But if you read a lot of the words of even old political figures in U.S. history that don't have really the right mindset to be a modern leader, a lot of them I found to be more moderate, more or less likely to be too party loyal. You know, because one thing I don't see enough anymore, which I thought was kind of cool when I read about old U.S. history, is people just flipping parties all the time. You know, which to me kind of shows that the party system's probably just bullshit.
Yeah.
But at the same time, people are really willing to stand their ground and not be afraid of the criticism and the hatred they'll get from their fellow colleagues and even the American people for stepping into another party.
Yeah.
They just did it.
Yeah.
There were people with more conviction back then. That's what's kind of interesting. And you brought up Abraham Lincoln earlier. I'm a big Lincoln fan. And not because of the surface stuff. Of course. Sorry, guys, I'm fucking with the platform. And Ben's waving. No, don't. Thank you, Ben. So my most important point is... yeah, that's what was going to happen. I appreciate you stopping me there.
It's all good. It's all good.
But, you know, Abraham Lincoln is famously known for little catchy bits, right? Oh, he ended slavery. That is a great thing. There's more complexity to it, though. Old Honest Abe. Not that honest, but he used it in a way that I approve of. He's my favorite corrupt president because he had to use corruption. What I liked about Abraham Lincoln more than, I'll say, any U.S. president is he was pragmatic as hell. So painfully pragmatic. That guy he was, I think, centuries ahead sometimes in terms of just being able to logically dissect a situation and not be hindered by emotions, because that's what the problem is.
Yeah.
You know, and because, you know, it's easy to forget to people, he was not the only one advocating for the freeing of slaves. A lot of people were. A lot of people who opposed him were fellow abolitionists who didn't like his approach or a slow approach. In the end, he's the one that got it done because he was pragmatic. You know, he invited Southern radicals into his house. You know, people he probably wouldn't get along with on a personal level, but he did it anyways. It's like, let's just find a fucking middle ground. You know, you also have to remember it was the height of the Civil War when this shit was going on. He was getting reports of hundreds of thousands of people dying every day. Americans, North and South, they're Americans dying. They are his countrymen by his perspective.
Right.
So, yeah, people like him, I haven't seen one since, unfortunately. You know, in terms of leadership, people who are pragmatic. And those people tend to communicate the best because they give time to have a long discussion, because they actually listen to what the other person has to say. Agree with it or not, that's irrelevant. You just have to know where they're coming from. You know, once all the pieces are on the table, then you can start putting the puzzle together. But if you don't get everything on the table, you're never going to get anywhere.
You gotta have a full picture.
You gotta have a full picture. And as painful as that can be, I can absolutely understand if I was in his position or with him, some advisor or something, sitting in that room, and say I had the same perspective, like I was disgusted by slavery, you know, the disenfranchisement of the black man in general, you know, because there was already some kind of pseudo freedom in the Union States, and to have to sit there across the table from like Jefferson Davis, the president of the Confederacy, to have his, because he had very harsh opinions on African Americans, you know, which was not uncommon at that time, but literally, like, they were lower on the evolutionary branch, they weren't really humans. It'd be hard to say that for your average person to sit there and hear that shit come your way. But thank God people like Abraham Lincoln didn't. They might have been twitching in the back of his head, like, you son of a bitch.
But took it in, let it go, and thought about it logically.
Exactly.
Right.
That's what we're missing. And even, like, I'm sure if enough people listen to this, what I'm saying right now could get me attacked. I realize that, because they are going to take the points they want. You can mess this recording up in any way you want to make it sound like I am in support of being more peaceful with the Confederates or whatever. People can do that. Right. And I'm not afraid of it, because I know that is not what I was saying. Yeah. You need to listen.
And people have more and more have been more receptive to podcasts because they like to listen to the whole thing. Right. They want to hear the whole story.
Exactly.
Which is such a good thing, you know, that's catching on. And that's, you know, I would challenge any president nowadays, you know, any candidate to be a president, to sit down and do a podcast.
Yeah,
you know,
that's a great idea.
Bernie Sanders was on the Joe Rogan podcast.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, for sure.
I have to check that one out.
Yeah. And you don't see it, you know. Yeah, debates are long, but it's back and forth, and it's just, you know,
right.
Too many voices, too many cooks in the kitchen. You know, I would love to hear a one-on-one podcast with a candidate. You know,
right.
I would.
Absolutely, I think that'd be great, especially because, you know, it's all curiosity now. We don't know what the hell's going to come out of the woodwork exactly. I mean, I wish some of the dinosaurs would stay out, to be honest.
Yeah.
But to go back, I feel like I was being a little unfair in some of the U.S. leaders with pragmatism. There definitely have been some other ones, but I harken back to Lincoln more because he's braver. Because I think Barack Obama was a blessing for our time, whether... To me, he was kind of a disappointment.
He's a mixed bag, yeah.
He's a mixed bag, but I'm so grateful he happened because he did bring a sense of calm. The world calmed down a lot because he is his way. He spoke really well.
He did.
He spoke really well of leaders. He knew how not to piss them off. He was pragmatic. Every once in a while, he'd shake the big stick, but for the most part, he stayed on point. He stayed diplomatic. Good for him. And really, it did calm things down, really. Even the Muslim world at that time, with all the shit going on in the Middle East, even there, it calmed down a little bit because they started to see, all right, with this new administration, new president, you know, maybe we'll see a change. They didn't get that.
Right.
That's where the mixed bag thing happens. Also, another thing with him and not being so brave is what I really admired about Barack Obama when he first started out, is he was killing it out there with, like, no sponsorship for his campaign, right? But then he just sold out. Had all these major investment bankers support his campaign. And then, when he was in a position during that shutdown, when they were, seriously, they had these fucking dragons, these investment bankers, all these Wall Street fat cats, and they had their throats out, vulnerable, ready to slit. And there were people in Obama's circle saying, take the chance. It'll hurt a little bit, but in the long run, we will really do good. Oust these monsters. He didn't do it. He didn't do it. Because they backed his campaign, but that's not an excuse. They gave you that money. You can still do what you want with them, you know? Sometimes, and I know, like, I'm sure he's thinking, and I wonder if he thought this too, because another nice thing about Barack Obama, guy knew history. Because he probably knew that Theodore Roosevelt did something very similar. He got people like J.P. Morgan and stuff to fund his campaign because the Roosevelts were always very famously anti-big boss, anti-capitalist establishment, right? Teddy Roosevelt was kind of a weird mix, but he, at least to his credit, even though being a bloated imperialist, he at least really wanted to limit the power of corporations, right? So they didn't like him. So they funded him, hoping he would go easy on them. He did not. He took them to town. That screwed him later when he was trying to re-elect, but that's irrelevant because at least he did it.
Right.
You know? And that's the disappointment of Obama. It's like, I wanted to go back and apologize. Like, no, there have been other pragmatic presidents that, just in my opinion, failed. You know, there's also Jimmy Carter was very pragmatic, but he was just very naive about the rest of the world. That got him in trouble in the Middle East and Asia. And then, Franklin Roosevelt is also very pragmatic, but he's hard to talk about because he's a very just complicated human being. You know, longest presidency ever during a very turbulent time.
Right.
A lot of these leaders are defined by the time periods they're meant to rule in. So, so people like Abraham Lincoln, their way of talking, I'd like to see it come back. I just don't know how that would. How to reprogram people to have the patience to listen to not
podcasts.
I think that's, there you go.
There's the answer.
Go in a podcast.
Yeah.
Problem is, if someone's listening to this and they hear stuff they don't like,
right,
a lot of people will just turn it off.
Well, I hope you don't.
Hope you don't, folks.
Yeah.
I'm really not trying to say anything hateful. Please, all I'm asking, I know I talk a lot, but please listen to our words.
Or mostly Kevin's, but
my bad.
Yeah, no, please do. I think you definitely know more about the subjects than I do.
Let's go crazy because I love it so much. But it's also a
hobby
weird
for you, right?
It's a hobby.
I'm just kidding.
It's an obligation. No, that's fine. It always has been a hobby, but now I'm taking it in as a cause. You know, because it is too important. And when the more you read history, the more you kind of get into this because you think like. every time we make these big mistakes again and again and again and again and again, we have perfect evidence of how that shit doesn't work, and we just don't bother to look back really quick and go, oh, nope.
We just keep falling into the same mistakes.
Yeah, Afghanistan's a wonderful example. Empire after empire after empire. It's incredible. They all start the same way, they make the same mistakes, and they get kicked out the same way. Why don't they learn? And it's not like you have to go all the way back to Alexander the Great's failed campaign. You can go back sooner, to the 70s and 80s, when the Russians fucked up, or before that in the late 1800s when the British fucked up, and then later in our lifetime when the Americans fucked up trying to get bin Laden. Same thing. Just learn. Read. Communicate. Anyways, that's my rant, folks.
Oh, man.
I hope your ears aren't too exhausted, but well, please tell me you have something to add on the matter, Ben.
Oh man, I don't know.
Oh, come on.
Ooh, you covered
We're communicating
it pretty well.
here.
I know, I'm trying to communicate. Yeah.
Well, remember the subject, man.
Yeah. It's communication.
It's communication.
It's communication.
And I just think it's cool that you went to that Lincoln thing. It got me starting off, but that was communication. That was really talking to your people. Being a president back then was way different too. You had to communicate a lot, you know. You didn't get letters half the time. You got just hundreds of fuckers showing up in the White House every day. It's like, you know, Mr. Jefferson down the street felt it was appropriate to build a ditch 3 inches onto my property. Mr. President, John Quincy Adams gave my grandpappy that property. You know, like, that's the shit he dealt with every day. So you had to talk to people all the fucking time.
Right.
At the same time, he had a dying son. He had lost another son. His wife was going insane. He had to deal with a civil war. He was trying to get the Emancipation Proclamation through. Yeah, he's an impressive individual. He was. I think the biggest tragedy is not seeing what he would have done with the rest of his second term. But, you know. Let's get back to communication. That can be a history episode on the faults of Abraham Lincoln.
You could go on and on about that.
Yeah, sorry. You said the L word.
No, I know.
Let this be a lesson. First episode, folks. Don't bring up Lincoln.
Yeah, keep going on.
I'll just give you a list of historical figures you shouldn't bring up because I'm too interested in them. No Ho Chi Minh.
Oh, jeez.
Stay away from that.
Yep.
But that does give me an idea to keep going with the communication aspect of this episode. And Ben, but if you don't mind me getting a little personal.
Go ahead. Please.
So Ben is a good friend of mine, and I adore his family. His family, they're just the sweetest people, right? The thing is, one thing I noticed that, you know, his mother had a Ronald Reagan book. And then, you know, sometimes, and, you know, no judge, whatever, like, believe what you want to believe. But one thing that I find really interesting is the dividing thing between kind of pro-Cold War and anti-Cold War. You know,
pro-Cold War?
Pro-Cold War, as in for whatever the U.S. had to do.
Oh, okay.
You know, instead of just leaving it be. Whereas the anti-Cold War, like the hippie movement in the 70s was a good example of a huge failure of communication. Holy shit. Between people who just said, you know, if they want to be communists, that's them. Why don't you just let them do it? And the others who really pushed for no, we need to stop the spread of communism.
Right.
So
the Red Scare, people making lists.
Yes. You know? So, and that's what I was curious about, because I'm not saying I know Ben's family's views. That's what I want to talk about.
Okay.
Is your family?
I don't know if I know my family's
views. No. Okay.
Well, what's the question exactly?
I don't
I'm
know.
curious. What's the question?
Why it's so hard for people to listen to each other regarding that particular subject, right? Because it is such a riveting divide.
Reagan
that
and the
lasted,
Cold
well, not just Reagan, but his presidencies before that with the Vietnam. Remember, the Cold War encapsulates a lot. The split of Eastern Germany, the taking of all the Baltic states, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, the Afghan War. You know, that's all Cold War. You know, and it really ripped people apart. Equivocally, in the United States, it's equivocal to the Civil War in terms of ideology, where it just really, or no one wanted to listen to each other, right? What I'm trying to, what I was hoping was seeing if you ever heard any if you can think anything kind of Red Scare-ish coming out of your family, because I also had that, not my immediate family, but my mom's side of the family is very anti-Soviet, whatever.
I don't know, we're pretty chill.
Pretty chill?
Yeah.
Oh, good on them. Good on them.
Not that I've heard. Yeah. Well, that's anticlimactic, I know, but
it's fine. It's fine.
No.
It was it was just my curiosity, but
well, I mean, you brought up an example. You were thinking of an example where you've heard some old opinions there.
Yeah, well, I still hear them.
You still hear them now,
I hear them, and not just people who are older. I hear them in people my age.
Oh, no.
You know, where Soviet's a dirty word.
A Soviet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, there was a coworker not so long ago where I mentioned I was just on my phone reading some news, you know, and because of in the current situation in Russia, with them being bogged down in the Crimea War and the Ukrainian War, and with Putin just being horribly corrupt and scary, you know, and then with the interference in Syria, which the Russian people don't really want, but they don't really have a say.
Okay.
That there's kind of this harkening back for the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
And I can empathize with that. I can actually understand that. As crazy as it sounds, when people say that they're pining back for the Stalin days, I kind of get it. I can kind of get it. But I can't even get to the point where I can explain myself with most people, because the moment Soviet, catchwords, communism, Soviet, Marxism, Castro, Lenin, Trotsky. They're trigger words for people, right? And this girl immediately just dismissed, didn't want to talk about it.
Oh, yeah.
What?
It's like, oh, bad idea. I don't want to talk about it.
Yep.
Yeah. I know this goes on to your scrutiny of Jordan Peterson. And
yes. Let's talk about that.
You know, I still love Jordan Peterson. I think he's a great guy. I think he's got a lot of good things to say. But I share a few of your criticisms where he's a bit too hardline on some things. At least that's what we've perceived it as anyway. Where he talks about happiness and how to be happy, and maybe we're misquoting him. Maybe we're not quite getting it. But he tends to push the idea. Or it sounds to us as if he pushes the idea of needing to get married, get children, and then now you're happy. You know, like this is what people are meant to do, and majority of people do those things. But you know, neither Kevin nor I are fans of blanket statements, and we would rather people make up their own minds as to what makes them happy. Right? Yeah. And of course Jordan Peterson's opinions on Marxism. You know, he mentions Marxism with such venom, such disdain, because a lot of his opinions are rightfully gained from like reading the Gulag Archipelago, and such books of the time.
Stuff on Stalinism,
you know, and of course, and Kevin and I both share the opinion that atrocities happened, and we should never want these things to happen again. And when we say people are wanting Stalinism back, that's not what people want.
It's not.
That's definitely not what people want.
Thank you.
You know what I mean? People don't want the gulags. People don't want this division and prisons. You know, but like with all good communication, nuance is important. Yeah. And so when we talk about Marxism, you know, we definitely need to, you know, it's important to be able to highlight what was good about those ideas. Yeah. What was good about, you know, about communism and socialism and wanting to help your neighbor, you know. Yeah. And you know, and
not having one ruling class make a decision for everybody.
Not one ruling class. Yeah.
You know,
and
a committee instead of one leader.
Yeah. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and it's when they started dicing things up, dicing ideas up, dicing people up, you know, separating things, separating ideas. Is no, you can't think that. No, you can't do this. No, you can't be here.
Kicking intellectuals out of the country, disagree with you like that. That's when it damns you so quick.
It's when it's fallen in on each other. Yeah. And maybe Marxism is a great idea until people get involved. You know, maybe it's just the flaw of humanity that we can't, you know, agree to do without all of these things that segregate each other, you know.
I think the same thing for democracy, because funny enough, democracy as its pure definition, same thing as Marxism. One thing I want to educate you listeners on right now, because we went into this, this is actually about, with as Ben put it really well, the venom Jordan Peterson has towards Marxism. It is infuriating because he's supposed to be an intellectual and he's missing a lot of his own facts in that statement, because you cannot slump it all together. Communism, right, is a form of government that can be applied to multiple countries, and it has. Just like democracy is a form of government that can be applied in different countries, and it has in many different shapes and forms. Because England has a democracy like we do, but it's different, but it's still essentially a government for the people, by the people, blah, blah, blah. I mean, democracy is also great until you introduce human nature,
right?
Yeah.
Because people suck.
People suck, and democracy is great on paper, but when you have so many voices in the henhouse, oh boy. Because that's one thing the Obama administration was just a painful show of compromises and not the right things being done. Like the Healthcare Act was just a complete, I agree with his motive, but what we got out of it, oh, come on.
Yeah.
And I come from a country where we just have government healthcare, so it's like you could just do that. Oh. And to hear all these people going like, oh, well, that doesn't work, who just don't know about it.
I know.
And so going back to Jordan Peterson, the same thing is like, don't confuse, because Karl Marx.
Well, he comes from a country that has socialized medicine.
Right.
Yeah. He comes from Canada.
He comes from Canada.
He's got that great socialism benefit right there.
Amazing.
And I was thinking about this earlier too. It's a little hypocritical, when Americans rag on socialism, because we enjoy a lot of socialist things. If something's going bad, you call the police. Oh, well, where's that funded? Oh, the people.
The people.
Interesting. Okay, well, there's a fire. Who do you call? Oh, the firemen. The fire station. Oh, who funds that? Oh, we do. The people. Right? And it's, I don't know. It's a bit hypocritical.
It's
because
hypocritical.
These are socialist things.
They are.
And
Yep.
Yeah. But and I wonder if people don't like these ideas because, or people tend to like these ideas. If I were to be cynical, you might say that people are okay with these ideas because it's a little selfish, Oh, my neighbor's gonna shoot me. What do I do? Oh, I better call the police. Okay, we're all okay with paying for that. Right. Oh, my neighbor's house is on fire. Maybe that's not selfish. Oh, but it might catch my shit on fire. Right. So I better call the fire brigade.
Should we call the cops? No, hold on. What direction is the wind? Yeah, you better call them.
Oh, you better self-preservation. And then maybe it's a lack of understanding of the benefit of medicine for everybody. People don't understand vaccinations and all that. People maybe we need a little more education as to why it's such a benefit for everybody to have it, because you can be even selfish about it too. Somebody's getting sick down the way, what do don't you want to take care of them? Maybe if you don't care if they're sick, well, hey, it might spread to you.
Yeah, that's exactly where my brain was going when you brought up the vaccination thing, is that there's a lot of bad communication in that too, in terms of the right information being brought out to people, because I can understand for the sake of your immune system, not wanting to over-vaccinate it, but you're right, it's incredibly selfish if there's like a big epidemic and you refuse to vaccinate yourself and your child. Yeah, you're making yourself patient zero, basically. You could potentially get thousands, if not millions of people killed because you're so proud of not vaccinating your child for whatever reasons, which, I'm sorry, America, most of them, they're not your own fucking reasons, so get over that. But it's true. It's something you read in the blog or some group told you, don't vaccinate your child.
You'll repeat it like it's your idea.
Exactly, yeah. And going back to the difference between, like, Karl Marx was really mostly pushing socialism. He was representing the workers in his time period in the 1860s were so abused. You had no real unions, you had nothing. No one represented the worker. You broke your arm in some smithing factory in London in like 1860, you're just fucked.
Yeah. There's no alternatives.
There's no alternatives.
And because capitalism works when there's good alternatives.
Exactly. And this is
but if there's not,
it doesn't
you're
work.
Screwed.
Yeah, exactly. And the British Empire was an incredibly exploitive system, and that's what Karl Marx wanted to challenge, starting with the labor force, right? And communism kind of spread out of that because it became an international idea that became scary to big business. Big business had a lot of politicians in their pockets that turned into anti-communist rhetoric. That's what got us all. And Jordan Peterson, I'm willing to say, without hate, that he's just another victim of this red propaganda. because you cannot put Marxism in the same bed as Stalinism or Maoism, you know, or even what Ho Chi Minh ended up practicing in Vietnam, or Le Duan, the one who succeeded him. It's not the same thing.
Right.
Like you said, it's great until people get involved. It just depends how people do it. But we don't communicate this aspect of history at all, and it's done a really heartbreaking amount of damage. If you really think about it, if you sit there and really read into the Cold War from all sides, it is guaranteed to depress you if you have a heart. Because the amount of missed opportunities, all the misunderstanding, you know, it's a tragedy, you know. And yet to hear Jordan Peterson always liken that, like, criticize those gulags, criticize Stalin, criticize that government, tell people about it. I encourage it because a lot of people in the world don't know about it because it was kept so insular at the time. They were like a massive hermit nation. I understand.
Yeah.
But this venom, this hatred for people you don't even know, that's what makes me uncomfortable. Because I still agree with a lot of what he says too. It's just those things. For one thing, I feel like they're irrelevant to his goal.
Do you just not like his conclusion, right? Or maybe his premise?
His premise and his conclusion and his overall idea about it, his attitude. It's just so unempathetic. You know, he will talk about these horrible things, but a little fun fact about all those gulags, I mean, most of the people that got killed in those were innocent, you know. What started that shit was people not willing to comply with a change that was necessary. And then it got out of hand. Like you said, things get chopped up, people get paranoid, they start locking up intellectuals, they start executing people for having disagreements, and it all falls apart. If things were communicated better. If you don't mind me going off on one thing.
Go for it, please.
Because this is a good example of historical bad communication, which really goes into this whole Cold War split in the first place. Because I'm sure plenty of historians will argue where it really happened. When it became a big global danger and a problem was right after the First World War. During. So you know about the Romanov family, right? The Romanovs ruled. The Russian Tsars ruled Russia for a very long time, up until that point. I think it was, what was his name? You know what? I'm not going to say his name unless I know it for sure. That current Tsar, Nicholas II. There we go. Nicholas II was the current Tsar at that time, and he was a very cruel leader. Most of the Romanovs were. That whole line of Tsars were just cruel. It was all about disenfranchising the poor, the uneducated, keeping them down that level so you can stay in power. Right? It was very militant. Intellectuals were handpicked to preach the shit they wanted to hear. It was just awful. The fires for revolution were so inevitable, you know. So in the course during World War I, which is just a massive turbulent chunk of history we can go into some other time, but in October 17th, the Bolshevik Revolution happened, and the Tsar and his family were arrested and put into exile. And it was a whole brand new thing, but what really made people mad, because there wasn't really much public talk in the United States about communism being a threat. It was starting to, but not to the scale it would become. What really pissed the current administration off was that Lenin sent Trotsky to Germany to meet with the Kaiser and say, look, man, that was our old government that started this war. We really don't want anything to do with it, so we're out. We're just neutral. Which I think is perfectly fair. You just lost millions of people. You're trying to rebuild a country with a new government. Just let it go. Awesome. Hey, thanks for not participating. Good luck with your new nation. Have fun. Empire at that time. They were literally inherited an empire. So that's tough. But that resentment that the U.S. and the British, just the Allied forces, had towards Russia for that's a situation of complete misunderstanding, because despite France's and the United States' supposed ideology about breaking free from oppressive governments, they weren't hearing that at all. They were just mad that they lost a major figure in their war, in their stupid war. You know, so that started the bad blood. This is what made it worse, Ben. This is one of the biggest fuck-ups in history. That just thinking about it now, yes, my fist is clenched, folks. Like, it makes me so aggravated.
Do tell, please.
So, course, there's most revolutions, you get counter-revolutions. It's like an earthquake. Don't expect that to be the last of it. You're going to get aftershocks. Exactly. Yeah. There's always going to be a counter-revolution, and it was. They called themselves the White Russians. They were Romanov supporters. They were, high commanders in the military. They were intellectuals. They fought like crazy. The Russian Civil War was very bloody. Equally as damaging as the First World War was, which was going on abroad. It was so much killing, and this is when Trotsky and Lenin really start showing their darker natures, because they were, kind of forced into a tough position, right? Which is really unfortunate, and this is not the only country to suffer from this. This happens again and again and again and again. When too much resistance makes people break, they forget the original reasons why they did this. But what made it worse, this is the international blunder, is because the Americans, the Japanese, and the British still supported the old government. They didn't want to recognize the Soviet Union. They recognized the Tsar. Now, if they just had that opinion and stayed the fuck out, that's fine. They didn't stay out. Little known fact. The Russian Revolution had 3 other players. The Japanese, the English, and the Americans. Ground troops fighting in Russia for the White Russians. They didn't win.
Oh.
One of the most impressive cavalry marches that Leon Trotsky ever put together, like the last famous big cavalry, something like 500,000 horses, just something ridiculous.
Jeez.
Pushed a lot of these forces out. The Japanese were pushed out pretty quick because their force was really pretty damaged from 1914. But that established really bitter relations, as you can understand. That's the thing. People emphasize whatever your Cold War propaganda mindset you may have, and I don't blame you, because it was so systematically planned in all our brains growing up. Empathize. Think of these people who struggled against a really oppressive government and just got challenged, and then to know that the international world was not behind them. Another big betrayal, to rewind a little bit, during the First World War, when they first started rising up, they stormed a government building in Russia, I think in Moscow, and they found all the Allied correspondences and how they were going to divide up the Middle East after the First World War.
Oh boy.
Which America hated that idea, right? This is still when we have some discipline in our ideology, right? We're like, whoa, that's not cool. That's not what we agreed.
Right.
And to be fair, even though I'm not a fan of that president at that time, he did not want that. And and Lenin got that to him. Right? Because he thought, hey, man, the Americans, they're like us, they're revolutionaries, right? They'll be on our side. They hate imperialism. Well, that was wrong. That was their mistake. And Woodrow Wilson, he saw that, and he probably said, that's an abomination, but we're still going to fight with the Romanovs against your revolution. And that moment fucked so much up for the rest of the world. These things would cascade into World War II. These things would succumb the Eastern world to fire for such a long time. The Korean War, the revolutions in China until Mao took over, the Vietnam War, all this stuff escalated from that blunder, of that moment of bad communication. Yes. Yeah. And we all suffer from it day to day. You probably have relatives you might have lost in some of these wars, like, it's not funny.
Nope.
It's embarrassing as a species to think, how did we fuck up this situation? This could have been beautiful. Imagine the alternative, right? This fantastic alternative where we could go back. Imagine the U.S. looked at that letter and went, that is bullshit. You know what? War's won. We pretty much did it for Europe. We have the biggest military. Fuck it. Russia, let's come to the table. We'll call the shots for the peace. Let's not let France hold on to its cruel empires, which, holding on to that empire, folks, is the reason why we got into the Vietnamese War, because they controlled Indochina. Fun fact, we'll go into that some other time.
Oh boy.
Right? That came out of that. And much, much more. That could have been prevented had you done that, right? Just let the Vietnamese be. They would have eventually overthrown the French on their own, which they did, and it would have just stayed that way. There might be other intervening, but it shouldn't have been. It should have been something we supported, not fought against. We should have been there with the Vietnamese. Hey, let's get these French fuckers out of here, because imperialism is not the way to go.
Thank you, Ken Burns, for that documentary.
Yes. Yeah. Watch it, folks, if you haven't. So that's the big shame. It could have been wonderful, because unfortunately, like I said way earlier, if you can remember through all my flabbergasting, is the victors write the history. So we think of the Churchills and the Clemenceaus and all these leaders of the Allied forces as great. No. They pretty much made sure that we will never have world peace with their decision making. If I can recommend a book on this, if you guys are interested in this subject and greater expansion, it's called A Peace to End All Peace. Largely focuses on those peace talks. I use quotations because they were nothing of the sort, but bad communication all around. No one was listening to anyone. You had your people from the Middle East cabinet, British people, who served there, coming there, going, hey, dividing up this into colonies when the Ottoman Empire is striking. This is not a good idea. We shouldn't do this. This is going to be. They like T.E. Lawrence, for example, pretty much predicted to the point what was going to happen in places like Iraq in our lifetime, flawlessly. See, patterns in history are not just good for not repeating a mistake, but also for planning for the future. It's like, damn, if we start this situation like this, it can unfold like this, because we can look back and see examples here. Those aftershocks, we don't account for them. So yeah, there's a good example of historical bad communication that fucked things up for a lot of people around the entire world.
It's one hell of a full circle back to communication. God damn.
So
yeah.
Whew, well, thank you for letting me get that out, that rant. Ooh. Anyways, Ben.
Whew, yeah.
I've been talking this whole time.
Yeah.
Please say something. If you want to know his face right now, folks, he looks befuddled.
Oh, man. Oh, that was a lot.
Yeah,
that was a lot. No, it's okay. No, I could tell you needed to get it off your chest. Yeah. No.
So I hope you're listening, Mr. Peterson. Ooh. Because I do appreciate his cause, because in many ways, ironically, he's talking about communication too. How it's becoming dangerous when we limit the way we use language. That's very dangerous. That's what got me into him in the first place. And I still stick with that, and I still support that battle. You can support someone and not agree with everything they say. Yeah, that's absolutely fine.
Absolutely. I know. I think you would have a great conversation with him.
Probably.
I would love to see you.
We might get along just fine.
Jordan Peterson.
Well, I've had Trump supporters in my house where we get along fine, but we severely disagree on a lot of things, but we don't hate each other.
And like you said, back to anyone around the world, people, we don't want bad things to happen to other people. It's it's a common thing.
Yep. And there are those who do.
Yeah.
But optimistically, I can say, folks, those are the minority.
Yeah.
The trick is not to give in to the allure of powerful ideology. It can be very dangerous.
Right. And this goes back to an idea we had before. Always truth seeking.
Right.
It's always about the search to finding out the answers. And if you think you found the answer, maybe you should keep looking.
Yep.
And it's not about doubting yourself all the time, although it could be perceived that way. But because I think a little bit of doubt is healthy, of course. But it's always about searching.
Right.
Looking for the truth, and always. Yeah.
Truth is out there.
Yeah.
Agent Mulder. And on that note, unless you have anything else to add.
No, I think that's a great way to end it.
All right. Well, folks, thank you for listening.
Yeah.
Very much. If my ranting ever gets old, please leave a comment saying, nice talk, shorten the damn rants.
Yep.
It's some self-discipline I can work on. This might get easier when I get more guests on too.
I think so.
I can definitely think of some chatty Cathys who will easily keep me in my place, and I'll be nice and quiet and just moderating. I look forward to those episodes.
I look forward to that too. Absolutely. All right.
But for now, I had a great time. I hope you guys liked it. Please show your support in whatever way you can.
Yeah.
Just like it, comment, even if it's negative.
Yeah.
I'm down to duel. But yeah.
But thanks for listening.
Thank you so much for listening.